And excellent. There we go. We are recording. So welcome to Solve, which stands for SaaSOps Live Virtual Event. Myself and my colleagues live the SaaSOps Live, and this is our virtual event. Hence, this is Solve. And this week we have a SOLVEtank episode, which is a bit like Shark Tank, a bit like Dragon's Den from the UK, where we get a SaaS vendor on to demo their product. We ask them some questions. We provide direct and always honest feedback. And then you, the rest of the viewing public, get to enjoy and benefit from our knowledge. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is episode 6. We've had 5 other companies on before on SOLVEtank. And today we have Patronum, which I think I pronounced it correctly. And I think it's either Greek or Latin for Google Workspace Management. But what they do, we will find out from Paul Lees, who's very experienced in the space, and he's here to tell us all about his company and product and what it can do. And then so do about a 20-minute demo, and then we'll ask you some questions, do a deep dive, and then we'll see where it goes. And we'll give you our honest feedback at the end.
Awesome, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and share my screen, if I may. So screen 2.
Yeah, there we go.
So is that come through okay?
Yeah, we can see.
So yeah, you were right, Colin. Patronum is Latin and it means guardian. So the whole idea of Patronum was to be the single tool that any Google Workspace admin would need to manage their estate, their Google domain. And so a lot of the things I'm going to show you, you will have already seen in other tools, but I think the thing that we are doing and what we're really keen about is working with the wider community. And hopefully after this conversation, we'll explore exactly what that means around feature requests and really make the tool something that the community wants to use and feels that they've got a vested interest in the actual tool itself. So I'll start off with the people view, and we'll get straight into managing some users and showing you the capabilities. So this is our view of the users in the directory. You can switch from a card view here to an organizational chart view, where we can browse through and see people in the org structure. This is all linked through the manager attribute, so it builds the organizational chart based on that. We can then click on Gareth, and that'll take us into Gareth's profile. We can go ahead and edit some of Gareth's details, standard stuff that you would normally see in the Google admin interface. You can also see Gareth's direct reports, how long he's been in the organization for, etc. And also Gareth's manager, and you can expand that out to then see the org chart again. So you can search for a particular user, find the user, and then browse again to see who they work with, who they work for, etc. We can go ahead and manage Gareth's Google Group membership, change that, or add Gareth to additional groups. He's actually in all of the groups in this example. We can go ahead and see Gareth's calendars, and also any calendars that Gareth has been given access to. We can also add calendars from other people to Gareth. So I can say, well, let's go on myself. That'll then look into my profile and my calendars, and then I can go ahead and give Gareth one of my calendars, and then give him whatever permissions I see fit to give Gareth. That will then send Gareth an email to say, Paul's now shared this particular calendar with you. When he's accepted that calendar request, that will then appear in this list. We can search and have a look through Gareth's contacts. So Gareth here has got a label, which you'd expect, which is the England Premier League, and he's got all the Premier League players from the English Football League listed in his address book here. We can then look at Gareth's files. So looking through all of his files, and say, for example, if we wanted to change ownership of any of the files, we can go ahead and say, well, we want to change that so that Paul owns that particular folder. And if there are any files in that folder and subfolders, we can then force them so that they all belong to Paul, even if they didn't belong to Gareth in the first place. So a way of standardizing and making Paul the owner of files in a particular folder structure. Another standard feature in a lot of these tools is email signature. So I can go ahead and just edit it with this standard GUI interface, or I can edit the source code directly. If I had those kind of development skills and wanted to kind of fine tune the email signature. One of my favorite options is the prettify. So if you dump in a signature into Gmail and then read it into through the standard APIs, the HTML is awful. It's generally on one line, and it makes debugging very, very difficult. Our prettify option takes the HTML and makes it human readable. We've also got the ability to look at Gareth's other email signatures. So if he's got additional send as in his Gmail, we can then edit in exactly the same way that particular email signature. We can go ahead and add other signatures from a list of predefined ones, or we can go ahead and create our own email signature. And then lastly, on the user profile, we've pretty much put every single API call that we could find from a Google user perspective and bunched it together in our settings section. So you can have a look at Gareth's vacation responder. You can have a look at the labels that he's got in his inbox. You can also add additional labels if you wish. If you've got additional labels, you can go ahead and then add email filters, again, using exactly the same approach as you would with the Gmail interface. We can create email aliases for Gareth, set up and or disable the IMAP settings, or delegate access. And here, Paul has access to Gareth's account, and then Gareth has access to Harry's account, and then we can add additional people to that in one step if we so wanted to. So that's the user part of the interface. We've also got group management, and we do something a little bit special with Google Groups. We could take the standard Google Groups here, and we can add users in there, which is, is really boring thing to do. But we can also convert a Google group into what we call a policy, and this would be an onboarding policy. So if anybody is in this particular Google group, you can then say, well, I'm going to give everybody a Google Calendar, sorry, a Google signature. And so I can go ahead and add particular details in there, job department, job title, etc. Or again, as I showed previously, use one of the templates. And so all of this now will apply to the Google group, and any members being added to that Google group will then automatically get an email signature. You can give them calendars if you wish. You can also add Google contacts. And so if, for example, I wanted to share all of my client contacts with everybody that was in this particular Google group, I could do. And then I can also give them particular permissions on how they access my Google label inside the particular contact. So if I said these guys just have the ability to change contacts, any contact that they change inside the label will then be reflected back to me, and then I will synchronize them through with everybody else in that particular Google group. We can also add files to those users. So I can say, well, everybody in the group gets access to one of my files. Let's say it's a marketing department and I want to give them all the marketing materials. I can go ahead and provide that access. And then again, with the settings, go through and add en masse email labels, email aliases, forwarding filters, all the kind of standard things that you would want to do en masse, you can do through a Google group. We've also created what we call email templates, and those are centralized canned responses. So we've been working with a lot of small businesses who've been using canned responses, and when it comes to managing those canned responses, they get out of sync very, very quickly. So through our email template option, everybody gets exactly the same canned responses. There's a Google add-on that you then add to your Gmail environment, and it then adds a canned response or an email template to that particular group. So that's like the view of the Google Groups, and I'll show you a little bit more about how the policies work in a moment. But before we do that, we're going to have a look at contacts. And Google have 3 ways of showing you contacts inside their environment. So you've got what Google call shared contacts. And by that, I mean these are the central contacts that you would have inside your Google directory that users would be able to see via the type ahead and other interfaces inside the application. So we can add individuals, or we can upload them en masse, and so that everybody would then get them as part of the Google directory, part of the address book, so to speak. We've then got the ability to see everybody's personal contacts. So what we're doing here is we've grabbed the contacts from everyone's contacts address book, and then we're storing them centrally so that the administrator can then search through those contacts. So this is really useful for GDPR related issues, where somebody contacts the organization and says, I would like to be removed from your environment. Now, most organizations would say, that's fine, I'll remove you from our CRM. Unknowingly, still having that data inside their organizations on people's mobile devices, on people's email, etc. By providing the ability to filter down and then deleting these particular contacts, we can guarantee that if someone asks to be removed, you can then remove them not only from your CRM systems that you have central access to, but also from the distributed address books inside of Google. And then we've got another way of skinning the contacts, which is through shared contacts. And so this example here is me sharing my England Premier League contacts label with both Gareth and Phil. And so if I just jump into the Google Contacts interface, this has now got the Patronum Contacts Chrome extension taking and manipulating this particular environment. And so it gives us this share option here. And because I'm now sharing my contact label, it now provides us with the shared addition to the label. So I can see quite clearly that this particular label is being shared. I can then go into the sharing of that label, and natively inside the application, I can see that we've shared the contacts with both Gareth and Phil, and I can change the access for either of those if I wish, or I can add other users to that contact label. And again, this feels like it's just a native part of the contacts interface. And then lastly, we can then look at the policies. And so, as I mentioned, we've got the group policies, which are automatically created when you add additional information to the group. But we've also got the ability to create and define policies for your organization. So here we've got a support team policy. We can filter through the policy. So we can say, well, anybody in the department that contains the word support. We can also preview who that would be applied to today. We can go through and add an executor. We can define what assets this executor is going to be responsible for. So let's say all. We can pick which person. We can also specify if it's the admin or the manager. Any fallback. So if the admin isn't available or fails to respond, we can also have a fallback position. But if we go through what we can do with a policy, we can do exactly what we've just seen in the group policy, which is add details to all the users, etc. But we can also take things away based on a policy. So if I come out of this particular policy and go into one of the deprovisioning policies, which is this one here. So this policy is now being set up as a deprovisioning policy. And when we highlight the nice big shiny plus icon here, we've got a small tiny minus icon. And if we press the minus icon, we get deprovisioning options. So this is deprovisioning for groups. So once this event triggers and the users that are within this particular policy are affected, we will remove them from the Google groups they're a member of. We'll also transfer ownership of any groups that they were managers of to whoever the manager is. Likewise, we can do the same with Google Calendars. Transfer, remove, delete options, delete future events, etc. Contacts. We can decide to transfer the contacts to somebody else, as well as transfer contact sharing. So if you're in an environment where you've shared your contacts with somebody and you don't really want that to be broken by someone being deleted, we will transfer the ownership of that sharing process to somebody else. Google Files, we transfer the ownership of the Google Files. In this example here, we're transferring the ownership of the files to somebody else, but we're then putting them in a particular folder structure, which is archived users, and then the name of that particular user, so that we will build up a folder structure, which is their files in their particular name. One of the feature requests that we've got, which we're going to be implementing, is to move the files to a Google shared drive in exactly the same format, so that you can move those files over to a Google shared drive, and it then belongs to the system, so you don't have to then do this again. And if you're in an organization that has a privacy policy, you can tell your staff that if they've got any private documents that they want to retain and not to be transferred when they leave, they can either delete them, which is the obvious option, or they can have them stored in the private folder in the directory, and Patronum will then ignore that particular folder. There's nothing to do with the email signatures. When people leave, you could put an email signature on there if you wished. And then lastly, from a settings perspective, you can set a vacation responder if you wish, but some of the key ones are delegating access to somebody so that they can then log into the leaver's email. But then from a security perspective, we can go through and delete the two-step verification backup codes, delete them from app-specific passwords, change their password, remove the password recovery so that they can't get back in. All the kind of things that you would normally have to do manually when someone leaves your organization, we do that automatically through this particular policy. We can delete them after a certain amount of days. We can rename them. If you rename them, the reassignment option pops up so that you can rename the account, but then give that email address to somebody else as an alias, so the emails that have been sent out that come back into the system will still be actioned by that individual's colleague or the manager or whatever you wanted to do. We can label them so that it's easy for the individual to see that these aren't really for them. They came in as part of a particular, for a deleted user. So one thing I would like to show, I think we've covered that from a roles perspective. One of the questions that tends to get asked is, can I set up a individual from the marketing team to just log in and let's say they've got access to modify people's email signatures. So in that you would create a role. We've taken the role management system that is already inside Google and we've applied that to Patronum. So here we've got some custom roles. You'll be able to see these in the Google admin, but and via the APIs. So these are all just native Google things, but we're now using them inside of Patronum. So here, Rahim has access to this for all organizational units, and the permissions that we have given him are for Patronum. So we can say he has access to people's calendars, or he has access to read email signatures. You may have to be able to update email signatures, etc. So you can start kind of create a help desk environment where you can give certain people particular roles where they can do particular things, but not have the full access to the entire environment. So that pretty much covers
really standard
everything
stuff.
from
I don't think they had anything out of the ordinary. So I think only thing that he mentioned.
Sorry, Brian.
That was
So,
an accident.
it's okay. So basically, yeah, it's all pretty much what you'd expect to see in a management tool. The direction of the products, we're still in beta. We've got an active group of testers at the moment. We're looking to launch soon. Pricing and all of that kind of stuff is still in discussions. We do not want to control who sets the pricing. So if you look me up, I've been in this industry for a long time. I understand how SaaS organizations grow and become successful. One of the things that we want to do in Patronum, and the team here are right behind us, is they want the market and the community to decide how we're priced, as well as the features that we want to add to the product. So we're looking to build a community of customers and clients, and they will feed into our roadmap. We will commit to taking the top 5 requests from the community and build them into the product. So it will prevent the organization or us as a company bending to the will of a large organization who will throw money and say, we want this particular feature. We will only be driven by the community, and it will be one customer, one vote. The pricing is currently being discussed by a pricing committee, which I am a single member of, and the rest of the members are customers and Google partners. So they're currently talking about pricing for that. The current thoughts are in the $8 range, and so our expectation is that it will be $8 per user per year. So whatever that is over the course of 6 months, over the course of the 12 months, we will charge on a month-by-month basis. We won't sign anybody up to long-term contracts. It will be a pay-as-you-go structure, so you can try it. If you don't like it, you can stop as soon as that month is up. So we want to be really flexible. We've listened to the market a lot, and we feel that we will be building a product which is ethical and right for the Google community. So any questions?
Excellent, great. Thank you, Paul, for the demo. And there will be questions because while you've been going through the products, the chat has been on fire.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. Oh, I'll keep sharing for now.
Yeah, because yeah, I'm sure they're going to want to reference something. So, who would like to go first? And we'll have to be quick. We've got about 20 minutes. Yeah, I thought you would, Rose.
First of all, I wanted to, my first comment when I came into the meeting, I was a little bit late. I was like, this UI is gorgeous.
Oh,
Like,
thank you very much. It's
so nice to look at. I'm sure somebody will ask you at some point if it's going to have dark mode, but I don't care. So I wanted to comment about, it seems like you guys have a very specific sort of philosophy that you were just talking about. I assume that comes from something, and I understand an inkling of what you're talking about. I guess from a product like this, obviously, I have to commend anybody who comes in here and shows us a G Suite manager or a Google Workspace manager, because many of us already use a very, very prominent one.
Yep, I can well imagine.
I have to commend anybody who kind of comes in here and shows us one. And I am impressed by this, I really am. And so I'm curious about how you see Patronum fitting into the larger sort of landscape of app management and SaaS management tools. And like, you know, like the reason Better Cloud does what it does today with all the different integrations that they have is because that's what the community pushed them for, is like, can I integrate more apps with this? Can I automate more things with this? And that's where kind of how they got to where they are. And so I'm curious about how you guys see yourselves fitting into that whole dynamic. Like, do you plan on eventually extending this out to other SaaS applications? Because I'm sure it'll be requested.
Yeah, absolutely. So if so in certain parts of the code, there is talk of multi-SaaS manager, which is where the original name of the product was multi-SaaS manager. I'm renowned for creating products with very boring names. And the marketing guys just turned around to me and said, we've got a great idea for you, Paul. We're going to call the product Patronum. And they explained why, and I just kind of lit up. It just summed up everything that I wanted to create. The word guardian, which is, you weren't in the beginning of the call. Patronum is Latin for guardian. It's got nothing to do with Harry Potter, although it doesn't hurt. Yeah, it's something that we're really passionate about. We do see it expanding into other SaaS products, but for now we want to really focus on helping the G Suite, the Google Workplace manager, administrator. We don't think that we will go into the 365 arena, just because we are just Google through and through. We've been working with a lot of small companies. And when I say small, I class sub 250, a small organization. And what they've been telling us is they seem to use these products, and then very quickly the products become very successful, and then overnight the prices double, triple, quadruple, and the larger organizations are able to cut deals with the vendor, and the small organizations then end up paying very hefty bills for, you know, to maintain the product. So what we want to do and what we are passionate about is just not being that kind of organization. We don't need investments. We are funded by it. We're self-funded, and we will work with the community to create a product which the community wants to use at the price the community is prepared to pay.
Excellent, great. Some other questions on there. Who else wants to ask a question? I know there's loads in the chat channel. Signatures, SSO, who wants to ask theirs? Miriam, I think you're muted.
All right. Thanks, Colin. Sorry about that. What if a user is a member of two groups with different signatures? How does that work?
So at the moment, there would be it would be a last person, the last group that would get the signature. The aim of the product is we will have inside the group, we will have a weighting. So you will then weight which group has priority, and therefore that particular group will then have the signature. So because email signatures and groups don't really go together, it's a bit like Coke and milk. They're not a really good combination. But if you put them in the right order, they will work.
Yeah, they certainly will. Caleb, you had a couple of questions. Do you want to ask yours?
Oh, I always want to ask questions. First thing that I have to know, what does the apps grid button in the upper right do?
What is the what? Sorry.
You've got an apps grid button next to your bell. What does it do?
Oh, this one. Oh no, this is your.
No, the grid. The grid.
Oh right, yeah. So that displays the apps. It was it was a cheeky little. No, we've actually created that ourselves. It was a bit of a cheeky nod to. It kind of follows on from what Rosie says. Is we wanted to create an interface that delighted the Google user, and we wanted it to make it feel like a Google app. And it is old, so we've got the old icons in here. So that but it needs a bit of a refresh. But the whole idea is that if you're using it, it should feel part of the Google infrastructure or the Google ecosystem.
Cool. All right, serious question though. What is Patronum's approach to like security and privacy? So like say a fintech company, for example, is evaluating your product. Like, what do you tell them to win them over? Because they're going to be concerned about like what compliance you're doing, how you're storing data, how things are encrypted.
So absolutely. So we are in the process of going through ISO 27001. And so from that perspective, we'll have all of those processes in place. The application itself is independently tested, verified, all that kind of stuff. As you know, the products to go through and be listed on the Google Marketplace, you have to go through a fairly hefty process these days. You didn't 10 years ago when I did my first set of products, but you definitely do now. So we're currently going through that process. We've just been listed on the Google Marketplace, although we are currently unpublished. That's been approved. We are going through the verification process for the app itself. The application is hosted on GCP. So we've got all of that security going on there. And so, yeah, everything that we can do, we're doing as much as a small business can.
Any other questions? If not, I've got one or a comment. I'll let other people think what questions you're going to ask in a second. As Rose has said and others have said, the UI is beautiful. It fits right in, and it's if other companies are looking at this, I'm sure they're going to hopefully step up their game and polish up their UI. That responsiveness there was just amazing. The org, I like the org chart. And it's an interesting idea to pull in that manager information. Once you've got that view, is there anything? Can you export it to an image or a Google slide or a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet, a CSV file, or is it just a case of having to do a screenshot to get it?
Currently, you'd have to do a screenshot, but I'd be interested to understand what you'd want to get out of that, or whether or not we could create a mode which was, for a presentation where you say, well, I'm interested in my team, splat, there you go. We can now put that into a presentation.
Yes, yeah, it is often, client presentation, certainly for new pitch ideas where they want to know the org chart, or even for onboarding of a team member, we can publish it to, an internal site. if it updated dynamically, that would be amazing. But
yeah, so some of the things that we've been looking at,
problems.
Yeah, so some of the things we've been looking at from an onboarding perspective is to use the Google Docs API, so that, for example, if somebody joins your company, in addition to all of the Google files and folders and email signatures being set up, we can create a file, a document which is theirs. So you can take the attributes from the directory, and let's say this is a contract or a policy, and then you can fill the details into their document. So HR no longer have to take a copy of a particular document and fill it all in. The application will do that for them. So that's the kind of thought process that we're going from a deprovisioning and a HR point of view.
Right.
Related to Colin's question, I had a question about exports while you were doing the demo. Like, Colin and I talk about this a lot, but we like to basically export like every page of data, because there's always a reason. Like, you never know when you're going to need it, but you're always going to eventually. So are we able to export like pretty much any data table that's visible inside the app?
So we don't actually store anything within the app. Everything that you see is being stored inside the Google directory. So everything that we do is in the Google directory. The attributes that you see, they're extensions to the schema within the directory. The only thing that you would need to export is probably the policies. And currently we don't export those policies, but I
guess I meant more like you show the data in a really pretty way, in a way that like I don't get to access the data a lot, but then sometimes I want to say like, okay, I'm looking at this data now, but now I need a CSV of it. And so like, I'm wondering if there would be a way to record, like initiate an export from using the APIs.
Right.
Even if you guys aren't storing that data, you could send the request to get an export.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all that information is just direct Google APIs. So you could use any tool to extract that data. We could add an export.
We use Sheets a fair amount.
yeah. Or Gamma or anything like that could just export the information. So
yeah. And I will close up saying that I'm very interested in the way that you've thought about the GDPR with regards to contacts. And the ability to scan the domain and remove people, because I don't think that's anything that's in all of our conversations since May 31st, 2017, when GDPR came out. I don't think any of us have ever said, obviously we know how to delete documents, scan for documents, maybe purge emails, but haven't thought about, going through everybody's contacts and getting those details removed.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting feature. Others, I know my colleagues must have some questions.
I have a question. And hey, Paul, nice to meet you. I'm Mike. I work at Better Cloud, full disclosure. So I know a bit about the inner workings of, dealing with Google APIs and displaying them and things like that. So my question is, and I think you sort of answered it in your last answer. How do you go about syncing data into Patronum and triggering some of these policies? So do they come straight from like the activity feed from Google, or do those actions need to be taken from within Patronum to trigger one of these policies?
So from a policy perspective, those are all directly through Google. So we, like I mentioned before, we don't store any data inside of Patronum from a directory perspective. Some tools, and I'm not 100% familiar as to the workings of Better Cloud, but some tools cache the information. So when they spin up, they have to do a dredging exercise and store the data in a database of some sort, and then they're then constantly working on their information and their data. What we've got inside Patronum is we're not doing that. The APIs have improved so much from a Google directory perspective that we're directly calling those APIs in order to display them in this particular format. If there's any changes inside the directory, they are immediately picked up because we are on top of the directory. So we're a layer on top of the Google directory, which kind of leads me into the areas of single sign-on and provisioning into third-party tools, where Google have done a great job of that. And it baffles me that no one's actually using Google as an IDP more than they currently do. A lot of people are doing Okta and then putting Google behind that, and it baffles me for the majority of organizations that don't need that level of integration, why they're not using Google. Google's got great provisioning capabilities when it comes to third-party tools, and so if you've got something like Patronum on top, all we need to do is a few little tweaks into these third-party applications. Google have done a lot of the heavy lifting, so that's the kind of direction where we see ourselves playing, where we could work with what people have already got from a Google perspective and add that layer on top. We don't want to replace things that work really well. There are elements inside the Google admin control panel which we could just port, but why would you bother doing that? People are quite comfortable jumping into another tool to do a particular job. What we want to do is provide administrators with a clean view of the users and be able to do things that they would want to do on a daily basis inside there. And then hopefully, as we grow, working with the wider community to set features, the roadmap, and the pricing and the support. And this little chap down here, he's our support guy. We've been offline for a bit, so we can play a bit of a game while we're waiting. But we want to build support into the product. We've seen quite a lot of organizations whose support channel is an email. And when it comes to support, I don't have time to drop out of the application I'm having issues with, to then send an email, to send some screenshots, to then wait an hour or two or a day, to then someone to come back to me, to then tell me to read the manual or whatever. We've built chat into the application so that you can get immediate support. Our guys can do a video call. We can screen share. We can see what challenges our customers are having in real time and fix them in real time. Again, just listening to what people want to do, understanding the community, and playing that back to them through our application.
Excellent. I know there's a load more chat and a few more questions going on, but we've got like 10 minutes left. And I think a lot of them have been answered. The demo was really good. I want to allow us to have time. So for everybody to give their quick, honest view of whether they can see a use for this. And I'm going to start at the top of the screen, and I'm going to ask Dan, who has been quiet through this presentation, his quick thoughts.
Yeah, no, I really like it. I was honestly just jotting down the fact that you have a support function that's already built in there and you can do live screen sharing. I mean, just that, regardless of all the other parts, just that would make me say yes to it. But I think it's a fantastic tool. I really like, again, this has been said, I really like the UI. It's very simple. It just kind of makes sense. So yeah, this is definitely a thumbs up for me. I like a lot of it's just simple and it does what it needs to do. You're not, throwing a bunch of bells and whistles that people may or may not need. So I really like it. So it's definitely a thumbs up for me.
Okay, yeah. If Rose has requested, can we stop the screen sharing? Then we can see everybody in full screen, make us easier. Brian, your thoughts on the product? Quick 30 seconds.
Hi, thank you. And I would love if we could also post Paul's contact information so we can kind of follow up with actual demos and use cases here. I mirror a lot of the other suggestions, requests, likes and dislikes that were in the chat, including possibly even creating specialized admins within Patronum that you can't necessarily do with Google Admin Console. There's a very wide gap of rights between what you're able to granularly give admins versus when you have to be a super admin to do it. And that causes a lot of problems with IT departments in terms of we don't necessarily want to grant super admin to everybody. That's a risk I think we can all understand and agree on. But in order for certain IT departments to do their job, they have to be a super admin in order to support the general populace. So I'm hoping that some of these use cases can be mitigated by this particular tool. I'll stop there and move on.
Excellent, cool. Andre?
Yeah, I thought echoing a lot of the feedback, I think the interface is really clean and neat. It's responsive. It fills a lot of needs, I think, for my organization's around 750 people. And, we recently implemented Workday, which is doing some of our organizational structure, but no one knows how to use it. So I think this would actually be a really great way to kind of democratize that. It's a frequent ask. I'd love to see, I think it has a really interesting, for beta, it's really pretty polished. And I'd love to see some more of the work that's going to go into it around like shared drives are becoming really big for us. And we struggle a lot with like identifying where files are as they've kind of migrated over the years with people with shared drives, and finding stuff in shared drives is kind of tough for the IT team right now. So it's kind of a hunt. So I'd love to see like where that goes as well.
Yes, great. It's ridiculous to think that shared drives have been GA since 2017, and the functions, the admin controls we have inside the Google admin panel are still very, very lacking. Miran, I can't, if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Miran, right? Yeah, I definitely like the interface, echoing basically what everybody else said here. I think just a couple points back to shared drive. And do you guys plan on adding Chrome MDM functionality to this as well? And what are some of the audit capabilities in terms of audit logging? I saw somebody else posted that, but definitely curious to know more about how that gets tracked.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I didn't show was the team drive element of it, which is a big kick up the ass for me. I should have really done that. You can look at team drives, shared drives on a user by user basis. We will be looking to add drive capabilities so that an admin can just say, just show me all the team drives, because that for me is lacking. And then explore into those again is a fairly straightforward. And an area that we didn't show is the logging, where we've got real-time logs as to what's going on, as well as the historical audit logs of what the admin has done, etc.
Excellent. Caleb, Coy?
Yeah, so a lot of this has been said already, but I think to me the biggest advantage of any kind of tool like this is reducing the number of people that are going directly into the Google admin console. And Rose, you hit on this in the chat as well. Like if you and I as an admin want to reduce the amount of time that I spend in there if possible, and so having super granular permissions that we can grant, audit logging that's really robust, and we can see what was done by whom and when, and track that down, like that's all going to be a huge win. I'll echo the question about like, what about the other Google admin features? What about MDM? What about resource management? What about calendar administration? Like, how deep can you, or do you plan on taking this? Like, is it just super high level of effort, or does Google not really make those APIs accessible? Like, what's the what does that landscape look like?
Yeah, perfect.
Rose?
Well, I'll be honest, I entered this meeting today expecting to be a little bit bored, and I'm not, which is a good thing.
Woohoo!
I really like what you're doing here. And I mean, honestly, I could probably sit and pick your brain for a very long time about some of the philosophies that you've expressed about how you're handling the data and about how you want to interface with your customers and things like that. Because I think it's a very different approach to what we see here in the United States. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. I think, like if I was on my own in my own organization trying to manage this stuff, I would probably take a pretty strong look at Patronum. As it stands today, obviously, I said it was brave of you to come in here because we all of us pretty much are managing Google in some way or another, right? And many of us have other tools that we purchased for it. And so in my organization today, we're doing Google to Google migrations, which is like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Mm-hmm. But I can still see value for what Patronum would offer in that scenario. In fact, I think Tucker is salivating to potentially buy this whenever we can. Just because it makes some really oddly tedious tasks easier. And it also does it without giving me a UI that I want to bang my head against all the time. So, it's hard to quantify the value of that. But yeah, so I mean, I'm excited to see where you guys go, and I'm going to keep my eye on you because I think you have something very interesting here.
Thank you. And you're probably using tools that I've created in the past to do the Google to Google migration. So I feel your pain. Google to Google migrations are difficult.
Yes, conversations for later. Yeah, Chris, let's quickly run through the rest. We'll have Chris, Steve, Michael, and then Jesse.
Yeah, I'll go real quick. I mean, I love this thing when I see of it. And as Rose said, Rose and I work together on the same team, so that's why she kind of called me out. I like it a lot. I really appreciate the price point. I think that's, even though it's not necessarily definitive at this point, I think it's a good move. And I love the community-driven aspect. There's a lot of companies that will promise you something and then say, sorry, this other company came along and gave us more money to expedite what they wanted. And so even though more customers want it, too bad. So I really, really appreciate that standpoint. And I would just mimic what everyone else said too. So, cheers.
Cool, Michael.
Yeah, for me, trying to take my competitor hat off here, obviously, having worked for
independent CEO hat.
Independent CEO hat. I think, I think it's a really nice tool for managing G Suite. You tick all of the main boxes for sure. The interface is nice, straightforward. I mean, it's hard for me to take the hat off knowing the other tools in the space, but it is a very good Google management tool. Yeah, I think you did a nice job with it.
Jesse?
Hard to go last on these things when everyone's already said what I was thinking. So I'll add my voice to the choir on, awesome UI. Love the, the speed and ease of use that we're seeing here, and definitely want to see the roadmap and see where you're going. And not to knock any of the other competitors that we've already talked about, but love to see more where you're going in the way of automation. A Google-focused version of these other ones may be helpful for a lot of smaller organizations that can't necessarily afford the larger products that are out there, as awesome as they are. So looking forward to seeing them.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Yeah, and I'll give a final closing thought. As everybody has said, the UI is great, and it does make working in a product so much easier if the UI is pleasant and responsive and well thought out. It just makes it so much easier. If I have a number of other tools, gone through a lot of pains over the last few years, seeing Google Apps, the Google admin panel being revised and a lot of features added to it, which is good. Obviously, this adds another layer of function that we could, if I was at a new business, would certainly look at investing in as a product to do easier management and some automation. And as everybody else has said, we really do look forward to keeping in touch and seeing how it develops. We all have products, but all products have a contract that ends, and things have to go out to an RFP, and we could choose new products as things develop. So thank you, Paul, for joining. Thank you everybody for coming and taking part. And we will see everybody in 2 weeks' time.